Hey guys, welcome back to another character/element discussion video. After making the elemental reactions video last month, someone in my Discord messaged me suggesting a topic on the best character for every element, and I thought that was a pretty cool idea. There's like a sort of microcosm when it comes to how players categorize every unit, and it's sort of indicative of the reasons behind players opting to play that element. That is to say, the best character of each element represents why the element is good, or as good as it can be. As always, like all Genshin rankings, edge cases and what-if scenarios can throw a wrench into everything, such as the case for any video game with a wide selection of characters. So this video is not intended to be the be-all end-all. It comes down to what you have and who you pair them with. That being said, these characters have proven time and time again they're one of, if not the best character for their element as we know it. That can obviously change in the future as more and more units come out. With that taken care of, let's not waste any more time and get started. Calling Pyro the most neglected element that isn't physical is an understatement. Prior to Dia's monumentally disastrous release, we haven't had a new Pyro character since Toma back in 2021. And though its standing among the 7 has fallen considerably, there's one person who hasn't, which is strange, what with him being known to suffer from unusually bad luck: Bennett. Bennett has been a premier staple from day one, and it's no surprise why. Not only is what he offers incredibly useful for a wide majority of characters, teams, and strategies, but his accessibility is the main selling point. Bennett is one of the few units in the game who's ready on arrival, requiring minimal investment in terms of weapons and artifacts to get the job done. His enormous attack buff is never not a benefit, and when you factor in a serviceable health regen for the active character, this guy's the definition of a one-button support. What's interesting about Bennett is that his virtues are ironically unrelated to Pyro. You could make a case for the initial cast of Fantastic Voyage being quite powerful if you vaporize with it, but the reasons everyone uses him in so many parties has less to do with the reactions that Pyro offers and more to do with the raw combat stats he provides. When you're buffing your entire team with upwards of 1000 bonus attack, you're essentially giving that 1.5 times multiplier from reverse vaporize permanently, so there's no real need to drive reactions with them. In fact, most people actively refrain from unlocking his final constellation for this very purpose. The honorable mention goes to Xiangling for her equally overpowered elemental burst. Pyronado is a fantastic ultimate for its ability to maintain the effects of any stat boosts well after they've expired, and the consistent Pyro application enables her to drive reactions for many parties. I initially had Xiangling as the best Pyro character, but then decided against it, seeing as most of the times where you would field Xiangling, you would also field Bennett to snapshot his burst, so she's somewhat dependent on being fielded alongside him, whereas Bennett doesn't depend on Xiangling. For Hydro, I'm actually going to put 2 characters together as opposed to a main and honorable mention. The title goes to both Xingqiu and Yelan. Let me explain. Over the past year since her release, players have been incessantly debating on who's the better of the two. Xingqiu is regarded as the all-purpose Hydro sub DPS, with his rain swords offering a healthy mixture of offense and defense compared to Yelan, who's almost entirely offense. In the past, I've touted Xingqiu as the better of the two, but nowadays I'm not quite certain. On one hand, you could make the argument that in almost every team where you would field just Yelan, Xingqiu can check off every box that she does, but with more protective utility like stagger resistance and damage reduction at the cost of damage. However, when constellations are brought into play, the gap in DPS and uptime is measurable. Yelan's elemental skill far eclipses her 4-star counterpart in my opinion, dealing significantly more damage, having greater area coverage, doubling as a faster sprint without draining stamina, and as a far lower cooldown. Additionally, with Constellation 1, Yelan does not require a sacrificial bow to use Lingering Lifeline 2 consecutive times, and if you manage to get Constellation 2, the DPS from Death Clarion Dice overshadows Raincutter by a mile. All the same, 5-star constellations are unobtainable for many, whereas getting C6 on Xingqiu is a lot more feasible. If we're talking C6 on both characters, then Yelan obviously wins out, but at C1 Yelan, that's where the line gets a bit muddled. Ultimately, I decided that it's a toss-up. Both of them accomplish what is expected of them very effectively. It comes down to whether you want to kill things faster or be more consistent. Yelan is riskier but more rewarding in DPS, while Xingqiu is more user-friendly. Pick your poison. For Cryo, I'm gonna choose Ayaka. Bit of a generic answer, but Cryo's in a weird position in the meta. Following the release of Dendro, a lot of attention has been shifted away from Pyro and Cryo and into Hydro, Dendro, and Electro, with that MO being as universal as it always is. The recent additions to the roster, Layla and Mika, have been tailored for situational utility, and so there hasn't been any real attempt at pushing the needle on the element lately. But if you ever need anything Cryo related, Ayaka is the way to go. Similarly to Bennett, Ayaka's power is intrinsic. She doesn't derive that much from other characters for her own sake, and that's why many players enjoy using her. The base damage offered by her auto attacks, skill, and burst allow her to sufficiently cut down most of the game's difficult content, further enhanced by Cryo's accessible yet circumstantially broken reaction, Freeze. As it stands, Cryo is a very insular element. Barring a Hydro character, it draws strength from other members of its roster like Shunhe, making the element and by extension Ayaka appear less all-purpose than Bennett or Xingqiu. but that's also what makes her so good. Her Cryo application is so consistent and powerful that you can reach full efficiency with only her and a Hydro character, chain freezing everything in your way for an easy clear. She not only has the highest damage ceiling out of any Cryo unit, but the most consistent application, as her passive sprint gives her virtually limitless uptime, making it almost impossible to mess up a chain freeze. Ganyu is a close second though. While her damage output isn't quite as impressive as Ayaka's, nor is she as consistent with Cryo application, she brings different benefits to the table. Her elemental skill allows for some semblance of crowd control, and Celestial Shower's massive area coverage contrasts with Ayaka's more concentrated Blizzard. Basically, you can think of Ganyu as the Xingqiu to Ayaka's Yelan. One is more damage oriented, the other is more user friendly. Of course, there's no rule saying you can't use the two of them together. Many people do, myself included. It just comes down to if you want an easy clear or a fast one. Hydro and Cryo were mostly a toss-up based on preference, but for Anemo there's only one who deserves the top spot. Kazuha. Kazuha's garnered a humorous reputation for being the quote-unquote real Anemo Archon over Venti, mostly because he highlights all the strengths of Anemo better than the Archon himself. To start, Kazuha possesses damage amplification for his team comparable to Bennett, courtesy of his talents in Constellation. The former granting an unconditional elemental damage boost to his team equal to a portion of his elemental mastery, which already increases the damage he deals from Swirl, making it a win-win. His elemental burst features a gigantic wind dome that periodically deals Anemo damage to everyone caught within, allowing him to consistently drive reactions in a wide area, and if you're looking to draw scattered enemies together, his elemental skill can do that as well, while also conveniently propelling him vertically, something you can use to take advantage of outside of combat. What he lacks in raw power, he makes up for with sheer utility that's conducive to increasing a team's overall DPS. The elemental damage bonus is practically always active, with its activation condition simply being to trigger a swirl reaction, something he does as often as he breathes. And when combined with the 4-piece bonus from Virtus and Venerer, this guy is your one-stop shop for damage, crowd control, mob clearing, traversing, and bossing all in one. The only thing he doesn't provide is any form of sustenance or protection. Honorable mention of course goes to the de facto Archon Venti. Venti's kit is a lot more straightforward, but for the circumstances that necessitate it, he's definitively the best character in the game, and it's not even close. Like Bennett, Venti is a one-button character. His elemental burst is to this day an instant win button for any dungeon or spiral abyss chamber that requires you to take out a large number of small enemies, a title that no one will ever likely take away from him. However, outside of that, such as against larger enemies or bosses, Venti's usefulness diminishes greatly, hence why I believe Kazuha is more suited to be the best Anemo character in Genshin, for now. Electro's gonna be a divisive choice for sure, but I'm gonna live dangerously and say the best character is not Raiden Shogun, it's Fischl. Wait, Shogun stands, please? Retract your booba swords, give me a moment to explain. There's no question that Shogun's power is second to none, especially in her own department. The raw force behind her elemental burst has carried me, and I'm sure many of us, through countless floors of Spiral Abyss with the Raiden national team, and the elemental burst damage buff on her skill is surprisingly broken, not to mention the self-sufficient battery power of any team composition with her involved. That being said, the landscape of Electro is changing. In last week's video, I brought up the potential downsides of the element's newfound popularity and how it's closely dependent on Dendro. With that in mind, the character who benefited the most from Quicken and Bloom is Fischl, thanks to her off-field presence being noticeably better than Shogun's due to having to use the latter as an on-field DPS if you want the full extent of her power. The most popular Hyper Bloom variant does feature Shogun, but you can replace her with Shinobu and vice versa for that team. Fischl still finds more usage in team comps involving Electro, making her a far more flexible character. As far as taser teams go, she's never lost her crown. Aggravate is also not even a contest. No one else on the planet can apply Electro as frequently as she can. And with Quicken's inherent splash ability with Hyper Bloom, Fischl can still find use in that team. She's arguably the only Electro character in the entire game to find gainful employment in every possible Electro team, whereas Raiden Shogun may perform better in certain teams but worse at others. Flexibility is the benchmark parameter for Electro characters at the moment, which is why I believe Fischl is better, but only by a narrow margin. Hence why Raiden Shogun is the honorable mention. Were this video made before version 3, Shogun would be the best Electro unit, but the advent of Dendro reactions benefited Fischl just a bit more. In its current state, the value of an Electro unit is predicated on how fast and frequent their application is above all else. Outside of the elemental burst damage buff, Shogun and Fischl are directly competing in this department. That burst damage buff is not substantial enough to contest Fischl's machine gun levels of application. Geo is... how do I put this? There are two perspectives for Geo. One is from outside of the element and the other is from within. Depending on which perspective you subscribe to, you can have wildly different takes on the best character. It's common knowledge that the best Geo team right now is Mono Geo, but with no intermingling between Geo and other elements, it really comes down to whether you like the Geo playstyle or not. With the notion that Mono Geo has always been a niche and rogue strategy, I'm gonna approach this from the perspective of outside of the element and declare the best Geo character Zhongli. Sadly, none of the reasons why pertain to Geo itself in this regard. Like Bennett, Zhongli is a character whose virtues are mutually exclusive from the element he represents, despite being the Geo Archon. Two things, defense and crowd control. Now when I say defense, I don't mean the actual defense stat. In the realm of shielding, he is the best character in the game. He's garnered a reputation for turning the game into Minecraft peaceful mode, trading a party slot in exchange for literally negating the difficulty of the game. If you have Constellation 2, then you effectively take 0 damage. That's sort of the thing with him. For players who like to autopilot through Genshin, he's God's gift to man, but for everyone else, it's debatable as to whether or not he's worth fielding over someone who supplies actual damage. Regarding the Geo element as a whole, he's still the most useful representative because everyone else is only good within the confines of Geo besides maybe Yunjin. But that ties back to the question of, is the best character supposed to be in a general sense or for situations pertaining to that element? Seeing as that's the mindset I went with for the other elements, I'll apply that for this one. Zhongli is the best character who carries a Geo label, but if we go by the character who does Geo things the best, it would be Gora. The Geo element wouldn't be remotely viable if it weren't for him. He's basically the crutch that allows Mono Geo teams to come even close to usable. Last but not least, we have Dendro. The element is still in its infancy, having only 6 characters to choose from, but in my personal opinion, I seriously doubt the top spot will be overtaken anytime soon. Nahida is the best Dendro character in the game. Unlike the other Archons, she's not only the strongest of her element, but she achieves this by capitalizing on why her element is as powerful as it is. She's the best Dendro unit to have for Hyperbloom, Burgeon, Aggravate, and Spread teams, all reactions that involve Dendro. Her consistent application is almost unparalleled, and with the chain lightning effect she has via her elemental skill, you essentially only have to target one person to get that same effect onto everyone. Not only that, Nahida shares the same elemental mastery hybrid scaling as Kazuha, where she can share her elemental mastery with the rest of her party to boost their damage, while stacking EM makes her Dendro reactions hurt that much more. Both her elemental skill and burst have permanent uptime while she's on or off field, and she even supplements members of her own class very well, as I'll hate them in tandem with her might very well be the strongest duo in Genshin right now. Even if, hypothetically, a new Dendro character were to be released that's insanely broken, for Nahida to be displaced, that character would have to do everything she can and better. Alhaitham does a ridiculous amount of damage, probably more than Nahida on an individual basis, but he's not better than her due to how consistent and accessible she is. So the only way she gets replaced is by copy-pasting her and increasing her numbers. That's about it. Her main drawback is that she doesn't bring any healing or shielding to the table, so you have to outsource, what with Dendro's penchant for self-inflicted damage. Fortunately, the sheer amount of damage you can deal through her reactions offsets whatever DPS cut you'll take from bringing a healer, if there even is a DPS cut to begin with. For Hydro, you can bring Kokomi, or to a lesser extent Barbara or Shinto, and for Electro you have Shinobu, either of which you were planning to bring anyway since you need their elements. Honestly, when I was first brainstorming who to pick for each element, I was worried that Geo, Electro, and Dendro would just be the Archons. I mean, thematically it's understandable. They are the elder statesmen of their respective elements. It would be strange for the god of lightning, earth, wind, or nature to be outperformed by a human with a fraction of their power. But surprisingly, the only Archon of the playable 4 that definitively took the top spot was Nahida. Venti has always been overshadowed by Kazuha. Zhongli's placement is tenuous at best, and I genuinely think Fischl is better than Shogun, even if only slightly. But what are your thoughts on this? Do you agree with my choices, or do you think someone else deserves the top spot? Feel free to share in the comments down below. Aside from that, if you enjoyed the video, it would be awesome if you could leave a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter at Vars, joining my Discord server, and while you're here, check out my Element mini-series if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in the next one. Take care.